Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to Audio Map. Today we're on part 5 of our mixing on an M1 MacBook Air series using Logic Pro in Rosetta. So if you've missed the other videos, make sure you go check them out. But just to catch you up real quick, we've gone ahead and finished our static mix in the last video. Yeah, so we haven't applied almost any plugins, but we went ahead and got an initial balance of our faders, trying to get the mix as polished as it could be just from the fader balance. So today's step is mix bus processing. But we're going to also go ahead and set the rear bus and the parallel drums. So basically, we're adding some EQ, some compression, a couple other effects, mostly to the mix bus, trying to get our mix just sounding as polished as possible right from the start. That way, we're going to need fewer plugins, fewer processing on individual tracks later on. Okay, so let's start by setting the rear bus. So if we go ahead and play our song and solo this, you'll notice that there aren't any drums in it.
You say life's a game. Say that it's rigged, well, that's okay.
Okay, so we're basically applying two separate layers of parallel compression. So we're going to be really just driving the rear bus and the parallel drums really hard, and then we'll dial them into taste. So let's start with the rear bus. So I usually like to throw in my Faraday limiter. Now this is called a limiter, but it can do a range from kind of soft to hard limiting down to more gentle compression. So I'll show you guys how to do this also on Logic stock compressor, but let's go ahead and just dial it in real quickly on the Faraday limiter.
You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and...
So I'm looking for about 10 dB of compression. I really just want to squash this, and then we'll just dial it in real gently.
Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay. I'm always looking for something out of sight.
I'm gonna put in a high pass filter so some of the bass isn't overwhelming the compressor. I'll leave it on left right.
Say that it's rigged, well that's okay.
Okay.
You just gotta know that it's rigged and you say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay.
I like to use a fairly quick attack and release. I'm not trying to get a bunch of the transients or hold on to it too long. I want it to be, you know, kind of reacting really quickly.
Laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be
okay, and that's pretty good. So just so you guys can see it again with a stock Logic compressor. See what it would look like.
You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay. I'm always looking for something out of sight. You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate.
I didn't like how distorted the studio FET was.
You will be okay. I'm always looking for something out of sight. I let it go, I wasn't right. You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say laugh right along.
Okay, so you can say you can do this with any compressor, really. If you have more than one compressor, and if you're in Logic, you do have more than one compressor, you can go ahead and try out different compressors and see what's giving you the best sound. And I think I actually like the sound of the classic VA a little bit better, or classic VCA, excuse me. Just fine tune it for this compressor.
You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play.
Okay. I still like the sound of the Faraday limiter better. It's got a fairly clean sound, but the distortion that it adds, the color is just, it just usually sounds really good.
You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that.
Okay, so let's go ahead and let's unmute this and let's just drag it into taste.
You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay. I'm always looking for something out of sight. I'll let it go.
I'm just going to check this in stereo.
You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by.
I feel like it's hitting the bass is hitting it a little too hard.
Life's a joke, well then I say laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay.
Okay, so we don't want too much of it, but this just helps get the vocal a little bit more present. And when the vocal's not in the song, like in parts where it's just instrumental, it helps just kind of bring whatever should be to the forefront more to the forefront. It's my experience with this technique. So we add a little bit of compression here. Well, a lot of compression, but just a little bit of it. And now let's go do the same with the kick, snare, and tom. And what I usually like to use on this is the Wolf from Goodhertz as well. So I have my go-to compressors and go-to plugins for certain types of processing, and then I'll just always try those first. And if it happens to not work, then I won't use it that time, and I'll usually have like kind of my second go-to compressor. So Wolf and Faraday are usually kind of my go-to compressors for a lot of things, but if Faraday is not a good one, then I'll often Wolf will be. Or if Wolf's not a good one, Faraday limiter might. My usual third go-to compressor will be Fab Filter's Pro C2, which again is a whole bunch of different compressors, kind of like the Logic compressor. So that one allows you to, drive test a whole bunch of different compressors real quickly. So if I don't get what I want out of Wolf or Faraday limiter, I always get what I want out of Pro C2. But if I was on a computer with none of these plugins, I've got like 6, 7 compressors I can use straight out of Logic, so that's great. So let's go ahead and do the drum. I always turn noise off, adds analog hiss I don't like. So I don't want too large of an attack on this because I don't want to this is going to be really hitting the drums hard, so I don't want to overemphasize that attack and just have the drums just smacking you with every hit. I will fine tune the punch of the drums on the drum bus itself. So I often will do kind of a similar value for this parallel track, and then just dial it into taste if it's not working. And I want it to be about the same volume. I want to level match it. That way I can see if I like the sound better, not just that it's louder. Louder sounds will trick you into thinking they're better. Just something about psychoacoustics. So keep that in mind. Always level match before and after your plugin or any processing. You see, this is just slamming the drums. And that's what I'm looking for. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dial this into taste. And sometimes I end up doing the same amount as I did on the rear bus, but it just depends.
You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. So in smaller doses, I really like what this effect can do to particularly the snare, but just these drums in general. You say life's a game, well then I'll play. Say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along.
Yeah, I like what that's doing. Okay, so we've got both of those going. So you could also throw in Logic's compressor on here and just, maybe use a FET compressor. Those are often good for slamming drums. distortion's a little bit more acceptable over here than on the rear bus where we're hitting the vocal and instrumentals. So, just up to your taste. And then make sure you listen to it. We could also A/B this with and without these two effects. So when we mute this, we're muting both of them.
Play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say, laugh right along, you'll be A-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay. I'm always looking for something out of sight.
Yeah, I like what that's doing. Okay, let's move on to the mixed bus processor. So this is where all of our tracks are heading. Everything gets summed into here. So this is kind of a double-edged sword because it's really powerful. Anything we put on here will affect the entire mix. We can make broad changes or broad adjustments to the sound of the mix really quickly with just, a couple of plug-in moves. But at the same time, we could really F up our mix really quickly too. So we want to make some broad strokes to help just get our mix that much closer dynamically, tonally to the goal, to the finished sound that we're looking for. That way we need to use fewer plugins and fewer processing, fewer CPU, less kind of math in the form of all the processing on all of our tracks later. That'll make the mix cleaner and easier. And generally I found it to improve the sound quality as well when we use fewer plugins. So we're going to try to get just with a few plugins to get our mix sounding a lot more radio ready right from the start. So I'm just going to be mixing the way I usually mix with plugins that I usually mix with. So that's mostly Goodhertz plugins, FabFilter plugins, and then a few different plugins from different reverb companies, a couple different compressors. I've seen a lot of videos. When I was learning to mix, I watched a lot of tutorials. And in that process, almost every tutorial used stock plugins. So I think that there's plenty of that out there, but something I didn't really see very much of was entire mix sessions the way the mix engineer would mix it. So what third-party plugins were they using? Because the thing is, a lot of these plugins are doing the same or similar thing, but it's useful to see, what is a realistic workflow that a professional might use or someone might use in their mix, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and use the plugins I would. If it's not entirely clear how you might do it in Logic, then I'll go ahead and just show you that real quick. But I'm just going to show you what I do on my mix bus. And I use 4 total plugins for a little bit different processing. So the first plugin I throw on here is Mid-Side from Goodhertz. So this just allows me to apply different processing so I can adjust the gain of the mid and the side channels and brightness or darkness using the tilt sliders. As well as apply different algorithms of stereo width, and then I can exaggerate or tone down the stereo width. So right now on this mix bus, all I want to do, I want to turn on this mono below. So this is just going to make everything below this frequency mono. So it's at 100% strength. You could do less if you wanted to. And then I like to put it just to start at 100% bass makeup. So it's going to get rid of gain in the bass from the sides and it'll add more to the mid. So it should be around the same volume after this move, but it should be more focused and centered. So let's see, I'm going to open up this because we're in mono right now. So we'll check it in stereo too so you can get a better sense of what it's doing. Okay. So if we're in stereo, and I pull this all the way up, it turns everything mono. And you can see this right here. I'm turning just about the bottom half mono right now. You hear the bass just kind of take a firm hold in the center. It's a little subtle, but when we combine a lot of subtle moves on our mixes, then we end up with large changes, right? Okay, so the way you could do this in Logic is just open, with a Logic stock plugin, is just open the Logic stock EQ in dual mono, and then you set it to mid-side. And now you can increase the mid channel a little bit, and you can cut out the sides. And there you have a similar effect. Okay. So now, I usually put compression second on my chain, but second in order, but I don't apply it until the end. So the next effect we're going to add is Wow Control from GoodHertz. So this is a tape plugin, and I'm mostly using it to add a little analog warmth and saturation. So if I go to, I like just one of the high quality mastering presets, and I leave the saturation on and the color off, but I turn the noise off because I don't want it adding analog hiss. I don't really find that too pleasant. And then, because we're on an M1 Mac, even though we're running Rosetta, these HQ modes don't seem to be causing too much of an issue at all, so just turning them all on.
Say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and
I would usually mix with them off and then just turn HQ mode on, high quality mode, on the mix bus. If you start turning HQ mode or high oversampling on various tracks, you might cause latency issues with like the plugin latency and delay and stuff. But when everything gets summed to this one track, and then I turn HQ mode on, but I usually just turn it on to bounce. But because this computer seems to be so powerful, I've just been leaving them on while I'm mixing, and it doesn't, nothing, there's been no issues so far. Those are real subtle, but a bunch of subtle changes add up. Then we're going to add the EQ. So the EQ I like to put on my mix bus is Gullfoss. So this is an intelligent EQ. It updates, I think, the EQ curve either 100 times a second or a few hundred times a second or something like that. I think it's over 100 times a second. So I'm just going to go ahead and set this. This isn't a tutorial on how to use Gullfoss or any specific plugin, but you can use Gullfoss to kind of, it'll feel like you're taking a filter off the mix. Like it just opens up and it feels more mixed pretty instantaneously. So let's go ahead and set.
By the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay. I'm always looking for something out of sight. I let it go, I wasn't right. You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. Gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that
I love how transparent Gullfoss is and how quickly it can just get a lot of the different elements sounding like I EQ'd each individual element a lot better already, but I haven't yet, right? So this basically allows me to get even further with my mix, right? So if I go then and EQ individual elements and as needed, then I have greater overall potential from this. So I really like this plugin, and you can adjust the brightness if you need to manually. I often will just leave it here for now and then adjust it to subtly later when I'm comparing to reference tracks. But that's the EQ. And if I was just going to do this with an EQ in Logic, I'd probably add a little bit of some high end, get rid of a little bit of something in the mids, maybe add a little bit of a boost in the low end. That'll do something similar to this, but obviously it wouldn't be able to fine-tune the mix as much as this is going to. Oh yeah, and with Wow Control, I don't think there's any built-in tape in Logic, but there is some things that provide analog warmth or color saturation, so you could use one of these EQs, turn the EQ off, then you could up the drive somewhere in here and choose one of these output models. So, you just listen and then choose something to taste. And then make sure you lower the volume a little bit. Okay. And then finally, let's add some compression. Now, I may or may not put compression before EQ. It varies. When I'm using on my mix bus, I like Gullfoss to be last or almost last. So I put this tape plugin last to simulate like we're bouncing the mix through tape. So then I put Gullfoss second to last. Gullfoss works best the more information it has. So you want to put it as late in the chain as possible. But I like to put the compressor before it so it has as much information as possible for it to work with. I'm going to go ahead and open Faraday limiter. I'm going to open 2 compressors actually. And Wolf. So these are my 2 go-to compressors. I'm going to go back in mono so I can make decisions in mono. When I'm setting my mix bus compressor, I like a fairly slow attack and as fast a release as the compressor will give me. So I don't want to be holding the compressor to be holding the signal down any longer than it's crossing the threshold I've defined. Right, like I want this compression to be fairly quick and snappy while letting some of the transient through. I don't want to squash the drums or the percussive nature of various instruments or things. So I want to let, I don't want too much going through because then it might exaggerate that, but somewhere like a moderately slow attack. You could go down lower depending on how aggressive the compression is, but I usually end up somewhere around 3 or 4. I don't want too much compression on this. Wolf doesn't really have very specific, you won't know exactly how much compression you're getting, but I usually choose a lower amount of compression, and then I'll often turn about half of it off, so I'm doing another layer of parallel compression essentially. So let's go ahead and listen to this. I turn the noise off because I don't want that. Let's see. And before I turn these on, that's a good level. I'm happy with that gain staging. I feel like this isn't on. It's not on. So I'm doing most of this, these plugins, this processing on the final chorus because I want the loudest, most intense, most dense part of the song for all of this processing. I've never done all this processing on the chorus and then found that, the verse doesn't work or something like that. So I always just do it on the final chorus, and that way I make sure I'm getting, the amount of compression I want at the loudest part of the song, and everything else will typically balance out, though I'll go check it once we're finished applying the processing.
You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and
okay.
Play by the rules that they play.
Set Faraday.
Life's a joke, well then I say, laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate.
So I usually use like a 2-to-1 ratio. I'll use 4-to-1 if it's like something really aggressive, maybe rock, sometimes hip hop. But let's go ahead and start here. And so Wolf doesn't have a meter, so I'm not really checking for that, but I'm looking to do around 2 dB of compression. This isn't supposed to be an extremely aggressive compression.
Play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say, laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along.
I don't always do this, but I sometimes set it to mid-side mode, so that, and then go to a 50% link, leave it there. That way it's compressing the mid and side channels slightly differently based on what they're putting out. It's not necessary. If you have any kind of mid-side compression, you could try that and see if you like it. It's all to taste.
Play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say, laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay. I'm always looking for something out of sight.
Okay, now I'm gonna pick.
You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say, laugh right along, you'll be a-okay.
So I'm listening for what's happening to the drums, what's happening to the vocals, what's happening to the strings. Just kind of listening to each element individually and taking the mix in as a whole and seeing what do I like better. What is punchier, more clear, just a nicer sound to me in this moment.
You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's by the rules that they play. You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay. I'm always looking for...
And I like what Faraday's doing. I'm gonna go ahead and turn Wolf off. Close this out. Okay, I'm gonna listen in mono and in stereo to see what this does to our mix as a whole. So I'm gonna A/B with and without these plugins.
You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay. I'm always looking for something.
So do you hear the bass coming into the center, the high end becoming just a little bit smoother and more prominent, the dynamics settling themselves out a little bit. These small adjustments, any one of these by themselves isn't a huge adjustment. Goldfoss is probably the biggest single difference, followed by the limiter, or a compression really. But taken together, so let's listen to it in the verse.
And I was sitting in Starlight, the star said, what's wrong, small soul? I said, I'm looking for something out of sight.
Yeah, it's night and day in my opinion. And then we can check it in stereo too.
You say life's a game, well then I'll play. You say that it's rigged, well that's okay. You just gotta know that it's rigged and play by the rules that they play. You say life's a joke, well then I say laugh right along, you'll be a-okay. Laugh right along and don't complicate. Laugh right along, you will be okay. I'm always looking for something out of sight.
Yeah, the strings come to life. So yeah, so I don't do a lot of processing here, but I think it makes a big difference.
I said I'm looking for something out of sight. I let it go into the night.
So yeah, that's about it. In case you missed any of the other videos, just a quick refresher on why we're mixing in mono. We're trying to get the mix sounding as good as possible in mono. We want to pretend that everyone was always going to listen to it in mono, and can we make it sound fantastic in mono? And then when we open it up, it's just going to sound even better in stereo. And in a lot of real-world playback situations, people will be listening in mono. Crappy phone speaker, crappy computer speakers, TV speakers from across the room. Even if speakers are set in a stereo pair, if you're not placed precisely between them, it's not going to come out stereo. You're not going to hear the stereo effect. By the time the sound reaches you, both speakers will be hitting both ears at roughly the same time. So you'll just perceive it in mono. So we're just trying to get the mix to sound great in mono from the start. And that's why instead of mixing in stereo and checking in mono, I mix in mono and then check in stereo periodically. Do certain processing in stereo, but mostly I'm working in mono. So yeah, there we have it. We have the rear bus. I guess I didn't mention a technique I picked up from Graham at the Recording Revolution. You guys should check out his videos too if you haven't seen them. They're great. He has a lot of good advice. Then we got some parallel compression on the drums. And then we got just a few 4 effects on the mix bus. So now we're going to go forward in the future videos and we're going to mix everything through all of this processing. So by the end of the mix, if we turned this off, it wouldn't work. This is baked into our mix. So yeah, there you have it. In the next video, we'll start going over some of these other buses and doing kind of a cross between more specific effects, you know, adjusting the keys, adjusting different vocal aspects. But still, at the same time, we're working on buses, so we'll be getting a lot done with fewer moves than we'd need if we were working on every track individually. So that's why this is top-down mixing. Starting here, we're going to move over to the next level of buses, add effects, we'll work down to the tracks, and we'll finish up the mix in kind of that general manner. And we'll keep adjusting the faders as we go. So I didn't do any fader adjustment really today, but as we go, we'll need to adjust the faders and keep fine-tuning them until we got it just right. So make sure you like, subscribe so you don't miss any future videos in the series or any videos on M1 Mac performance. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.